I'm profoundly honored to be part of this resourceful discussion today. And it's with no doubt that we all know and appreciate that educating women equals to educating a nation. Kenya generally as a country has committed itself to education as a fundamental human right. And the intent to achieve this is also spelled out most of its legal and policy framework. However, it still remains a challenge for all stakeholders, particularly government, to be able to make this a reality. And I want to appreciate the previous speakers who have paved way for a very good and a healthy discussion this morning. And I was truly inspired by both Zahra, the lead person from Mawazo, and Dr. Fatuma Ahmed, who I hold in very high esteem. And I think the discussions today are very, very clear why we need to be coming together as women, to be supporting and listening to each other, so that we are able to learn a few things from each other. And I'm very, very grateful. You had the previous discussion this morning where we've made one of the biggest breakthrough by having Dr. Fatuma Hersi go back to classroom. So thank you very much. You see how we can make easy wins when we come together. So it's crucial to recognize that access to quality education still remains elusive for very many African countries, and particularly for Somali women and girls in Kenya who face equal challenges than many other African girls, but again, have issues that could be peculiar for us. And the insights that I wish to discuss this morning would emphasize on what are the concerted efforts maybe we need to do as a team after finding out. I'm happy we have researchers in the room who I'm sure will find room to be able to, pick a few things and see what it is that they can actually do further research on, because again, most of this discussion is still a bit informal because it's not accompanied by a lot of by any data per se. However, once you're a practitioner, I've been in this field for the last 37 years, and I think that gives me a bit of insight from teaching primary school, secondary school in northern Kenya and Nairobi, then to working with the Ministry of Education in Kenya for many years, and now advising the Ministry of Education here in Somalia. I'm actually speaking to you from Mogadishu. It gives us leverage to have a bit of understanding. So most of the issues we could be in touch with are mainly technical, and they could also be policy related as well. So in addressing these challenges, when we speak about the female students in Kenya, Somali female students in Kenya, we are referring by extension to northeastern Kenya. And it's not easy to ignore the historical marginalization and the geographically far to reach challenge of northeastern Kenya being as the primary and the foundation of most of the challenges that people would go through when it comes to that would easily go through when it comes to looking at education. So in addressing this, I would want to make a reference to maybe also the historical issues of, Northeastern not being seen fully at independence as a region that had fully integrated, but somehow they were push and pull, like a good number of the inhabitants of northeastern Kenya wanted either to join Somalia or be autonomous from the country. But again, later on with negotiations at the Lancaster House, the agreement that led to now northeastern Kenyan residents who are Somali origin agreeing to be part of Kenya. And I think, again, once the region overcame that problem and agreed to be part of the country through a referendum, the issue of, creating that strong trust in the country politically is still a problem up to today. There are issues of trust, much as a majority of the community are, a part and parcel of the socially mainstream ideas of being part of the country. But however, the trust is still missing. And therefore, for a very long time, there were historical issues of either underdevelopment by either default or by design. And also, we can't ignore the geographical far to reach distance from the capital, and also the rough terrain, the hostile climate, as also contributing to issues that relate to the underdevelopment in education or rather lack of much progress being realized in quality education. So we cannot also we cannot be shy from correlating the lack of quality basic education to also inadequate entry to higher education. My passion has always been in early childhood and basic education generally, because of my own personal history. But again, more so as an educator, you know very well, if a child cannot read, if a child cannot be able to do simple arithmetics, developing that appetite for wanting to learn and wanting to get educated is usually compromised, because what helps a learner pursue the process of education, the process of learning, is usually the ability of the learner to be able to comprehend the language of instruction and to be able to also read and be motivated to gain knowledge from reading. So what mostly schools in Northeastern go through is that a good number of the students don't get to learn how to read. And therefore, right at the onset, they are excluded from the process of learning. And once they are not able to read, or maybe they read but with difficulty, chances are high that they would be demotivated to continue learning and to stay in school, or even to see the relevance of wanting to stay in school. Of course, there are those exceptional cases of students who are highly talented and gifted, who are able to read, and you know as an educator very well that what motivates students to be able to focus on wanting to continuously learn and have the thirst for learning is the ability to read. Because in the initial stages of education, people learn how to read, but in the later stages of learning, people learn from reading. So therefore, if the reading is incapacitated in any way, it affects the learning. So, and once an individual feels that they're not learning or benefiting from an environment, it's very high. It's very easy for them to drop out from the system. So why is it so? Why is it that they're at an early stage they're not? There's the element of lack of qualified teachers in the area. A good number of the teachers who are posted by the Teachers Service Commission do not feel safe to live in Northeastern because of the perpetual attacks from Al-Shabaab, or maybe general insecurity. And therefore they would feel safer to get transfer and come back to other areas in Kenya. So that way, the students get to lose a lot of learning time. They get to lose qualified teachers. At times, those who step in to volunteer may not be as qualified as expected and may not be teachers as well. So therefore, the classroom environment that a child in Northeastern province, or rather Northeastern region or the counties are exposed to, are not as competent and as friendly as you compare with other parts of the country. So this becomes the biggest hindrance, because also the contact hours, the contact learning hours are limited, and a child doesn't get exposure as expected, because these days learning is very diverse, and students get to, the biggest entry to students to learn is the basic education. So if this is not taken care of, it becomes difficult for the students to pursue further learning. There is when you look at the learner outcomes in the national exams, currently we still have the KCSE and the KCPE at a primary level. With the CBC, there's an introduction of the other levels being tested as well. Most probably these results will be made public soon. But previously you would see from those results that the northeastern counties are always at the bottom nationally. And it's sad, because that situation has been maintained for the last 50 years. So you would wonder, is it that we are comfortable with this? Is it that entirely as a country we don't find this a problem? Because leaving out an entire population of people who are already marginalized geographically and because of so many other reasons, and not getting adequate quality education shows clearly that they will not continue progressing as well as other Kenyans. One blessing, you would say at times, is the ability for those who have capacity to access schools outside Northeastern, and these are very limited numbers of Somali children, very limited numbers. Of course, there are those Somali children who migrate and come to live in Nairobi, either by choice, because it's considered, Kenya is considered one of the countries that has done so well and has a good education system. So families would either migrate or temporarily come to live in Nairobi or other big cities in Kenya to be able to access education. And they are of Somali origin, but of course from other areas as well. But now, where do you leave the average Somali child who doesn't have adequate resources to move to where quality education is available? It becomes a problem. And we therefore need, as a team, to be able to ask ourselves, what is it that we need to do to be able to improve this? So the correlation between poor basic quality education and you know, the lack of adequate entries to institutions of higher learning. So for any child to benefit from a schooling system, the child would require to be exposed to a qualified teacher, and among others. So once these teachers are unavailable, or rather there's a hindrance to accessing such teachers, then obviously it's like from the start of the race, the Somali girl and women are already disadvantaged at the beginning of the race. So we may want to look at that entry point, which is very important for all of us in terms of educating the girl child. A good number of teachers also leave the region because of insecurity, as I had mentioned. Also, security concerns generally, and it will be unfair to demand for people to endanger their lives, especially if they are conspicuous from the rest of the community. And maybe those who target to attack the residents of these counties would specifically be very focused on attacking those who don't look like the residents of the locals of the place. So this has perpetuated also and made the situation worse for the Somali girl. And therefore, we may want to collectively take responsibility and ask ourselves, how do we create a safe space for the learners? How do we guarantee that education can be accessible by all, irrespective of the geographical location? How are we able to guarantee this? These are the things we may want to look at in terms of research, in terms of asking each other questions, because at the end of the day, this is what affects our children at an early stage. Then general access to quality education still has some significant hurdles. Many children in this region also, most of the schools in this region lack infrastructure. Very little commitment is shown into improving the infrastructure. Although there's the CDF that's available these days, and quite a number of the MPs from the area are trying their best to ensure that at least they're able to develop. But again, it's just a drop in the ocean. But probably we may want to look at how can that be supplemented. The amount of instructions that a child receives at an early age is very important. So if these instructions are not provided according to what the curriculum demands are, that child cannot compete with the rest in the country. Kenya has a very clear way of, assessing the students. And the child in Mandera or Wajir or Garissa is assessed in the same way a child in Nairobi, Nakuru, Eldoret, Mombasa is tested. And you will find that in the olden days, or after colonial, or even during colonial days, the British and the churches did really spend a lot in developing education in the areas that were majority occupied by Christians, because Muslims turned away, of course, and did not want to be converted. Therefore, they were disadvantaged. So majority of the schools that are developed and well equipped and have the best teachers are mostly a good number of them belong to the churches and Christian organizations. Even if the teachers, the schools are still public, the sponsor is usually the church, and it becomes very difficult for the Muslim child, even when they make it through the primary school through a lot of struggle, and they get admitted to these national schools, they are forced, they go into a culture shock because they are forced to not wear their hijab. Others would even be subjected to go into to attend mass, to go into the church and pray in the church. And you'd find that instead of now learning, they're actually exposed to something different. The child starts questioning their identity. Others become apologetic Muslims. Others become very saddened. They're demotivated. So instead of now learning like the other students and taking advantage of the opportunity in this very good school, they are exposed to other social issues that complicate their lives further. And I remember I was mentoring students in national schools from Northeastern. And one big problem was that when the kids are admitted to the school, and the first thing is they are told to remove their hijab. They are forced to go to church. They are taught CRE. They are also exposed to sometimes some schools have pork in the kitchen, and they cook pork for the students. So the child is actually now dealing with bigger issues than even focusing. So majority of these girls were doing very poorly in schools. And because some of them would resist to go to the church, some would resist to attend the CRE lessons, they would always have discipline issues with the school principal and the teachers. And you'll find while others are learning, others are, most of these girls are out of the class, their parents are being called, or maybe you'll be called in as a mentor and you'll be told so and so has refused to go to class. This Sunday she's refused to attend mass. And all these are problems, even when they get access to schools. Although as mentors, and I think Fatuma Hersi was also together with me in this team, we were able to talk to some of the principals to at least allow the girls to wear their hijab, give them a place to pray. And on the day that pork is cooked at the school, an alternative arrangement is made. But very few principals would want to go out of the way. Would want to go out of the way because it's quite costly for them. It is also very disrupting. And a number of them would actually outrightly tell you, I belong to this church, and I believe that any learner who benefits from this school must also go to for mass and must also, doesn't have to, you know, adhere to other things. So anyway, these are the challenges also girls go through when they go to most of the national schools. Some get to do very well, despite all those challenges and all the odd experiences that they go through, they get to do very well. I'm sure someone like Fatuma Hersi will have her story. She went through Kenya High. I've met so many women of my age who also went to schools like Alliance those days, and they used to go for mass. They will tell you their experiences. But again, you will always know that in a class of, let's say, if they are just, initially they're very small. Out of, let's say, if 120 girls are admitted in Form 1, maybe you'll find from Northeastern around 5 of them. A good number of times, those 5 don't get to finish the school. At times, you'll have only one child, one girl finishing the system at the school, and others dropping. So I would say, despite the initial fundamental issues of culture, inhibition of, you know, the culture inhibiting, we are having other complexes and even modern complexes that are affecting the girl child from Northeastern Kenya. And we are trying so much to see how the government has been very helpful in terms of, you know, preparing a policy and a directive that says do not discriminate against any child. Don't subject any child to learn a religion that they do not adhere to. The school environment should be made friendly and safe for everybody. All this in terms of policy are there, but they are subject to the goodwill of the principal and the sponsor of the school. So having said that, it's important to point out that, mind you, the ones who are going through these complexes are the girls who have done well now from Northeastern. Against all those odds, they have been able to perform well, and they've come out as the top from their counties. But necessarily, they might not be the top in the country. They could be even, the schools could be practicing even affirmative action to be able to admit them in those schools. So already they have issues of performance at the beginning, because when you talk about Alliance girls, you're having the cream of the country. So that there's some share and there's a quota, a few girls who will be taken from Northern Kenya will be girls also who are not taken from the same level with the others. So they are expected to compete with everybody else, but yet they're also exposed to other social complexes and cultural issues. So at times, these are the hurdles that I see, because my area is basic education. And it is the start for a girl to be able to make it through to a level where she becomes now, goes to university, you know, makes it through life and becomes a career woman and is able to, you know, be a beneficial person to the society. She really has to go through a lot of challenges. But I'm saying a good number of women organizations, humanitarian have shown a lot of interest, want to support, and that's why you find a few were able through UNICEF to actually go through these schools for a period of, I think it was about a period of 4 years. But again, I think, I did not see the last report that was done, but I think roughly around only 40% were able to see through the schooling process entirely through to the end. More than 60% might have fallen off the cracks. So these are the issues usually that affect our girls. On top of it, you'd find from the communal level, the way a boy's education would interest the community is not the same way education for a girl would interest. A good number of the parents who practice Islam and are very supportive of educating girls, unlike those who are not Islamically educated. Those that are in the reserves where and where nomadic life is the way of life still get married at a younger age, and they also still are exposed to issues of female genital mutilation, which again in high school would really affect their health. They would have painful periods. They'd be exposed to, unhygienic ways of living, and they'd find it very difficult at times to go through the schooling process, or they would continuously be asking for permission to stay away from school to take care of their needs, and then join in the school later, and at least lose like about 5 days, 4 days. It might not be, in terms of statistics, it might not be the entire a big team, but that's a small version of the girls, particularly in the most rural areas and far-to-reach areas within the northeastern counties, where FGM is still prevalent, and where also early marriage is still prevalent. You still find that girls get to have. There's also a modern phenomena where girls are getting interested in getting married as a way out for economic reasons, and they wouldn't want to continue with the schooling process. I've met girls who finish their O-levels, and the first thing they're targeting to do is to just get married, and mostly it's related to also poor performance. And others would even outrightly tell you, I don't think I'm benefiting from the schooling system. I'd rather get myself a husband. So it's never like what we used to see before on issues of, forced marriages. So now this is a new phenomenon where they're finding marriage could be a way out, could be maybe an economic, escape. So, and this is where now the issues of role modeling and mentorship come in. If we are able to mentor these girls and expose them to bigger numbers of role models, a few could be having parents who are educated and do not have difficulty. But there are quite a bigger number who do not have exposure to girls who have, women who have made it through life, who might not see the relevance of, being patient through the schooling system, because the schooling system for a girl in Northeastern is very different from a girl in other places in Kenya, because they go through all those challenges, and they really need someone to tell them it's okay. And these days, there's some interest now developing of female teachers going back home and teaching at home. A good number would prefer teaching in the rest of the country, just for the same reasons that we've discussed previously. But again, even those, I've just been having a chat with a few of them who I usually mentor, who are back home and they're teaching maths, physics, others are teaching chemistry, biology. They'll come back to you like, it's very demoralizing. Like when you have a class of, let's say, 50 girls and only 3 girls are able to comprehend the language. How do you now teach facts, and how do you now create the interest of them learning physics or science? I was just talking to one of them this morning. So it's interesting. The dynamics are still there. We need to support the women who are now teaching in mostly high schools and primary school, we need to also see if there are possibilities as an intervention. If we can get more women to teach in the early childhood, women who are really committed, women who really can motivate these young learners to be able to read, because reading is very key. What USAID had been doing initially was introducing what they were calling, they had a program that was running for some time that was called the early grade assessment in reading and early grade assessment in arithmetics. But again, you know, the irony is you cannot be testing or assessing what children have not been taught. It's unfair. Instead of spending time in assessing these students to just collect statistics to see where are they in terms of reading, where are they in terms of arithmetics, would rather spend money on, you know, helping them read, teaching them read, like a short-term program. If we're going to do an EGRA or EGMA for, let's say, a period of, let's say, 1 year, that 1 year, if we focus on teaching young girls and boys on how to read, might be more effective and sustainable than coming back to just assess what you know already and the ground is not working. So for me, I would say it's very important for us to really look at the real issues that affect these students, to be able to support them in the process of, you know, learning. And even the teachers themselves, the teachers who did a lot of incentives to stay on Northeastern. Because if you find, for example, a teacher is from the other part of the country, it's not very easy for the society to also, for some reason, integrate and accept this teacher. They will always be treated like outsiders as well. So it's difficult for them to also feel comfortable. So maybe we need to come up with also, we are looking together with that team of from the region, Kina Fatma, how do we create incentives around that? How are we able to support these teachers? If it's helping them save their money more so that they go for further studies, give them short trainings, you know, incentives like if we are now talking and engaging with the Teacher Service Commission to tell them to give them extraneous allowances so that these teachers feel like it's a national duty for them to help these children and to teach them. And you know, so these are the interventions we are trying to look at. And we are hoping also in the room, we could pick some of these things to see how can we improve those poor grades at an early stage. Then while children from educated parents have chances of doing better, those that don't have role models at home and around them have difficulty in seeing the importance of, you know, the importance of continuing with the education. So we might also want to look at investing more. There's a bit of mentorship going on, but it's very limited, and it's very limited to schools in the urban areas. The schools in the periphery and those that are in the rural areas, people are not fond of going there. So can we get a team who are committed, who can be going and, you know, help us remove all those obstacles in terms of attitude? Because attitude is one big thing. I'll tell you to just show you how these things work. And I grew up in Nairobi and went through my primary school in Nairobi. And I was very lucky to have had teachers who really focused on reading and really motivated us to be readers and encouraged us to read books a lot while we were very young. When I lost my dad, who was a government, a public servant, we had to relocate back home as orphans. And our mom was illiterate. She had not gone to school. So I joined Wajir Girls Secondary School. There was only one teacher, actually the head teacher. After a year, another teacher joined him. So throughout the 4 years, there were about 6 subjects that we never saw a teacher in class. But what helped me individually was the fact that I was able to read. I continued reading the books and create pictures in my mind, draw those diagrams to be able to conceptualize. Luckily, we were doing general science and we were not doing the pure sciences. So, and by the time we were sitting before we start for the exams, a few teachers who were brought were actually like, these girls should not sit for the national exams. If they've not had teachers for all this period of time, Why should we be exposing them to the exams? But alhamdulillah, because of my reading, because of my strong primary school background, I was able to do very well, and I was the second best in the entire province. And I want to that's just to showcase how important reading is and how important basic arithmetic is to a child. If we're able to build that strong foundation, the rest can be okay. Even now, I'm doing a consultancy in Somalia, and my focus is if we can get these children a qualified teacher, a very good teacher, even if they study under a tree, there's no problem. A good teacher will always cover the curriculum, will always motivate the child, will help the child stay on in the process and want to continue to learn. So the biggest investment, and the people whom we've ignored, are the teachers in the primary and the secondary school who need a lot of our support. So it would be very nice if we could be always echoing this and sharing and looking for solutions around how do we empower teachers, how do we support teachers in the process. In Somalia, one time before, when I was doing the feasibility study, there was a teacher proficiency test that was done the previous year. So I was wondering, why would someone go test teachers around? And these are people who are actually selfless. They might not know much, they might not be highly qualified, but they've gone out there to give their service for whatever reason, even if they were earning a salary, or maybe they were doing it out of love for the work. Why don't we focus and use the same money to build their capacity, teach them, start helping them instead of the exposure? I think you saw that report in Somalia where it showed that more than 50% of the teachers at that time could not pass that proficiency test. So for me, we would rather focus on the solutions. Like you found teachers, yes, they are willing to teach, then what skills do they need? What other extra resources can you give them so that they are meaningful to society, so that they're able to keep the children in school? Because some of them, when I had their testimony in Kismayo, I met this lovely lady who was working with the Ministry of Education, the gender office, and on her way, she used to find these very many children on the road just loitering, and at times going to school, but the distance is very far. They get tired. Some of them just decide to play on the road and not go. So she decided to use her own house, moved her mom to the Kismayo town, then converted her house into a school. And within 6-7 months, she had about 250 kids learning at the school, and she would get a few kids, other young kids who finished school, Form 4, and to come and teach them. Even those who finished 8, to come and teach these kids. And it was flourishing. But as a quality assurance officer, because that's what I'm advising the quality assurance teams, if you look at the national standards, you will start asking yourself, one of the dilemmas is that will you be able to qualify this as a school, because maybe it will fall under the standards, and are those teachers registered teachers, or rather are they qualified teachers? So these are the realities. So someone gives that, but should not be hindered by policy, should not be hindered by regulation. Instead, we should find a way out to interventions to build the capacity of that teacher, build the capacity of that school, and help the schools and teachers come to the standards that we want them to come to without necessarily disrupting what is already there. So I know I have said a lot. I'm sorry I've taken a bit of time. So we need to work on breaking these barriers for our children and our women, particularly in the entire region, I would say. Because when we talk about Somalis, we talk about northeastern Kenya, we talk about Somalia, we talk about Djibouti, we talk about all this other, the entire Horn of Africa. I mean, almost the entire Horn of Africa. So let's all work together and pledge to promote gender equality in terms of also, providing education by enhancing the educational infrastructures that exist, making our schools safe, and providing that economical support to our our learners, and together we are able to forge a way and be a more prosperous society. If we don't leave our girls behind during learning, we will be progressing. We are looking at, I love what Drew Forster was once the president of Harvard said, we educate women because it is smart. We educate women because it changes the world. So it's smart to educate our women. It's a smart move. And I'm very happy the Somali Gender Hub has chosen to do it this way. And I'm sure we'll benefit from each other, and we continue with this discussion, and let's continue doing what each one of us does best, and continue to learn from each other. I'd want to stop at that and thank all of you and apologize for the long talk I've given. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Fatma. Can we give her a round of applause, please? I think I'd like to say that you don't need to apologize. We could sit here and listen to you all day long and not feel a certain type of way about it. But I also want to highlight, courtesy of what she just said towards the end about ensuring that women are educated. I'd like to say that I'm incredibly grateful to come from a family that has insisted on women's education, and I would not be here if my hoyo, my own mother, did not insist on her daughters being educated. So coming from a community and a family background that truly believes in women's education is empowering and endearing. Just to say a few things and to thank Madam Fatma. I think I'd like to do it on behalf of everyone who's here in person and online for enlightening and inspiring us during this conference today. Your keynote presentation on Somali female students in Kenya is a topic that is not discussed enough. I would like to say that your insightful address is not only a highlight of our conference, but also a very pivotal and incredible moment that has shed a light on a critical and often underrepresented topic. So thank you so much. I'd also like to admit, I think on behalf of everyone here and online, that your expertise and your passionate delivery has truly and deeply resonated with all of us. It has sparked important and critical thoughts, and I'm sure it's left a resounding and lasting impact. Your dedication to exploring the challenges faced by Somali female students and teachers alike in Kenya, and identifying the opportunities for their advancements and at the end of the day exemplifies the spirit and the essence of what we're doing here today. Just to pick on a few things that you've mentioned in terms of culture inhibitions, modern complexes, discrimination, government interventions, and so on, that have contributed to the issues female students and teachers in Northern Kenya are facing. It truly highlights the work that needs to be done communally and nationally as well. The social complexes and the hurdles that you mentioned that the same female students have to overcome to become career women and a contributing influence to society is truly rudimentary to overall gender equality and better communities. So once again, Madam Fatma, thank you so much for your valuable contribution today. Your presence and expertise has elevated the conference to new heights, and we're sincerely and truly and deeply grateful for your support during this conference and for ensuring that it's a resounding success. So shukran and thank you so much. The other part that we'll need to look at during this portion of the conference is our first panel discussion. But before we get into that, I'd like to open the floor for a 5-minute Q&A or discussion session addressing anything that and everything that Madam Fatma was discussing and sharing with us today. So we'll do a 5-minute Q&A discussion session, courtesy of Madam Fatuma Ali Saman's discussion, and then we'll move on to our first group of panelists. If you're online, you could just easily post the question in the chat. I'll read it out, and we can move from there. Anybody in the audience? Yes? Yeah, let's just pass it on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is she Dr. or Professor Fatma? Sorry, I didn't pick
Both.
the honorific. Okay, that's fine. My name is Charles Wafula, and I want to, at the outset, say that your presentation was very fantastic, and it gave very interesting insights on your experience, and you were so coherent. Somebody would have thought you were, reading it off script, yet you were just speaking, on top of your mind, which I think just shows how immersed you are in these issues. I broadly agree with everything that you said, though I wanted to just follow up on maybe two things. One is when you spoke about the marginalization of the Somali girls in the Northern Frontier districts, I think you raised very fundamental issues. What I hoped to also hear from you was the role that, say, the 2010 Constitution has played in in tilting the balance in favor of girls from marginalized communities. And what I'm saying here, for instance, is number one, issues around rights. I think one of the things about Kenya's Constitution is that it has a very progressive Bill of Rights. And the level of consciousness also generally across Kenyan societies is pretty high now. Like I remember, I think 2-3 years ago, there's a parent whose child had been chased away from school because the child had dreadlocks, and the parent sued the school, and the child was allowed back. So, for instance, this issue of girls being, subjugated or being forced to, say, remove hijabs, which is very unfair. I wonder whether those things are still happening, because I feel like the Constitution has sort of like tilted the balance a bit, and now if a school engages in such practices, I think a parent can push back, through courts or whichever other avenues of recourse. The second one is, I don't know, what are your reflections about the role of devolution in also supporting education in these regions, now that I think, of course, from independence up until maybe 2010, the Northern Frontier districts were getting a very raw deal in terms of the amount of resources that were being sent there by successive governments. They got, very limited resources, and that greatly disadvantaged the girls and, of course, just the general population. But devolution has had a measure of redistributive justice, in terms of how resources are going. And in fact, if you check, say, the formula of calculating the monies that go into these regions, of course, there are contestations about, how to rework the formula. And but for, like, I think a couple of years since 2013, the formula, for instance, took into account the question of historical marginalization, and then there was also, of course, the question of land size. Population, of course, is an ongoing discussion, now becoming a hotter cake in that respect. But maybe if you could also share some of your reflections about what has been the role of devolution in terms of redressing that historical marginalization. Has it failed, or has it helped in terms of pushing the envelope and trying to expand the opportunities for girls from those regions? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think what we'll do to save on time is just keep it brief, one, and two, maybe I could take all questions or comments right now, both online and in person, and then Madam Fatma can just address them all in one go. So I'll just ask again here in person if there's anybody else with a comment, a question. Zamzam? you can use mine.
I think
All good.
okay, thank you, Madam Fatuma, for the nice discussion and nice presentation. As a student from Northern Kenya background and having school in Nairobi and all my life, in Nairobi, Nakuru, but I'm interested in understanding, like the issues in Northern Kenya. Do you think like our parents have kind of maybe failed to take up the opportunities that have been presented to us by the government? For instance, through devolution, like my colleague over there has mentioned, I think we have had the opportunity, but also the kind of politicians we keep on electing, what have they done for us? Because in terms of insecurity in Northern Kenya, we don't really need to be taking, teachers just from other parts of Kenya. I think we can inspire our own kids from Northern Kenya, training them, and then taking them back to Northeastern and teaching, reproducing knowledge again. So what have we really done in terms of the political leadership in Northern Kenya? I'd like to hear their position, like what have they really done for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Samson, for that. I've checked online and I think we're good on questions and comments. So Madam Fatma, you have the floor to address them.
Thank you very much, my colleague Charles Wafula. And on the issues of marginalization and the role of the new constitutional dispensation, remember, Charles, there's a difference between a constitution and constitutionalism. A good number of the old Kenyans are still stuck to the archaic thinking, because you would be very surprised as I speak to you. I'm actually part of a team that are handling over 20 cases of outright discrimination of these girls. And we've been in and out of court for the last 5 years. You can check the statistics from the Muslim Education Council, and you'll find that even a court directive that was given was completely disrespected by the principal. And a good number of these principals also have the support of the sponsor child to continue insisting. There is still, even as we speak today, was it yesterday? There's a standoff at one of the schools in Marsabit, where the Catholic sister has completely refused for the girls to attend classes in their hijab. So there's a difference between what the law says and what individuals have capacity to do. So it's very few of us Kenyans who have actually live according to our constitution and are able to respect our constitution. Yes, our Bill of Rights is very, very progressive. It has tilted to some extent some of the biases that Kenyans had, to the extent that now actually some communities feel threatened by the presence of, because people are used to seeing like in a class of 50 students in the university, maybe 2 or 3 will be from Northern Kenya. But now if you find 10, we start complaining there are very many, to the extent that now people are getting even scared of the presence. And I agree with you, there's quite a lot that devolution has also done. Remember, education is not a devolved function. It is a function of the national government as it is. There's only one small portion that was given to the devolved units, which are the county governments, and that's the early childhood, a bit of the early childhood, which has now also changed by the directives and the recommendations given by the Presidential Working Committee, where they've insisted that the early childhood has to be part of the primary school education. And also the Kenya the polytechnics. So the village polytechnics and the early childhood are the ones that are coming under the county government. Still predominantly the function of education remains a national function, and therefore what I have seen the counties have done, and they've done very well, is give scholarships to students. Do you know, interestingly, Brother Wafula, to the extent that the governors at times knock door to door looking for girls who are qualified to be given, to be allocated funds to go study outside the country and in the country. And they're not there. I remember one time being approached by a women rep from Wajir to help her look for girls to go do medicine in Sudan. And she had 10 slots. I could only get one girl qualified to go for that. So you see, it still goes back to what I said, basic education and lack of quality at that level. The moment these kids are learning is disregarded at an early stage, the more complex it becomes for them throughout their journey. Then on the issue of, what was the other one? Yeah, I think, yeah, so far. Oh, there was the issue of the political leadership. I think that's an independent issue that communities, and I think it still goes back to lack of education. The reason why people elect poor leaders and corrupt leaders is because of lack of civic education. In northeastern Kenya, the trend has always been the negotiated democracy. The clans would sit and would do alemasar for an individual. That could be the most corrupt individual, the most immoral individual, it doesn't matter. But as long as the clan has given their say, then everyone else will just vote for them. And that is an indicator that still we are doing very poorly in terms of education. So it still goes back to education, because an enlightened community and a community that's educated would understand their political rights, will understand what democracy is all about, would understand what just social justice is all about. And that's why I was very happy that the Gender Hub is actually picking on issues of education, because that's the key entry to development and the progress of any community. And I do agree with you. I know how disillusioned you can be, but again, it is up to you, my daughter, to train and teach the community and provide opportunities to become the social change agents that I think Zahra is working towards. Thank you very much, Zahra. I'm sure by the next 5-6 years, you would have a big number of change agents coming from this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.